The Sex Pistols, one of the most iconic punk bands that come out of the 1970s. They inspired tons of bands. That's what we're redesigning this week on the monthly album Redesign Series. What's up, guys? My name's Dylan Zachary, and I'm a graphic designer and music enthusiast. So this week on that monthly album redesign series, we got an iconic record, and as you've seen from the beginning of the video, it is the Sex Pistols, Never Mind the Bollocks. So last month, I was reading Steve Jones' book from the Sex Pistols. I knew I wanted to redesign a punk rock album. My designs often have like punk layers to it with the analog textures and everything, and how I like that rugged, distorted, distressed design work. So I knew I really wanted to do a punk rock record. Since I've been on a Sex Pistols kick, I figured I'd redo the Sex Pistols, Never Mind the Bollocks, one of the most iconic punk records of all time. So I read Steve Jones' memoir, and I also watched a TV show based on Steve Jones' memoir called Pistol. Both of them were really great. They were so informative, and Steve Jones has been an iconic character in the guitar world for as long as I can remember. It was really cool to hear his side of the whole Pistols universe and everything, with Vivienne Westwood and the whole fashion and how everything was leather and ripped clothing, and just a really edgy side of the punk rock underworld of London, England in the 70s. So the Sex Pistols formed in 1975, and the Sex Pistols consist of Johnny Rotten, Steve Jones, Glenn Matlock, Paul Cook, and Sid Vicious. Most people equate the Sex Pistols with Sid Vicious, but Sid Vicious was only in the band for a brief period of time until he ended up dealing with a whole Sid and Nancy situation at the Chelsea Hotel, with Nancy being killed by Sid Vicious and/or their drug dealer at the time. Sid sadly passed away of a drug overdose about a year later. That being said, that is the Sex Pistols, and today we are redesigning a legendary album, Never Mind the Bollocks. But first, before we get into the album redesign series, I just want to say thank you so much for checking out all the videos, and make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. It helps out so much to a small-time YouTuber like myself. If you love music, graphic design, concerts, and just cool life stuff in general, make sure you check out my other videos, because that's what this channel is about. It's just music and fun and graphic design all wrapped up into one. Okay, so here we go with the monthly album redesign series. Like I said in the beginning, we are redoing Never Mind the Bollocks, and it's a legendary one. When you think of punk rock, especially early punk rock, you think of like Stooges, definitely the Sex Pistols, New York Dolls. The Sex Pistols, they inspired so many artists for years to come. They are the pioneers of punk rock and punk fashion. So I wanted to make sure I included a lot of that style to this design work. On the original vinyl release copy of Never Mind the Bollocks, it was actually a yellow and pink color scheme on the album. The one back here is actually a 1980s repress, so that's why it's pink and green. But the original Never Mind the Bollocks is this yellow, pink Sex Pistols font. That's the most iconic colorway that everybody knows when they think and hear about the Sex Pistols. So that's why I decided to redo the album cover in that fashion. And here is the design that we came up with. So I had a lot of ideas for this album. At first I was going to go with a sticker slap, stamp slap of the British Empire stamps throughout the 70s and 80s, and just kind of paste them all over the place. I added this manila paper style on top of this stamp to give it that paper-like texture, and I made it pink. I got this awesome picture of a phone booth, and I masked it out. As you can see here, I wanted to use this telephone booth because this telephone booth just represents London, England, especially back in the day, because these telephone booths were everywhere. When you think of London, at least for me, a guy from New Jersey in the United States of America, the first thing I think of, besides the Queen, the guards that stand at Buckingham Palace, and these iconic telephone booths that are all throughout London. So that's what I wanted to do with this specific design. I knew I wanted to incorporate London heritage in some way, shape, or form. And I wasn't going to do a horse with a guy sitting on horseback. That wasn't the style. I took this telephone booth, and I knew I wanted to work with that. And like I said, I had this stamp idea. So instead of actually using a bunch of stickered stamps, I just took one square stamp, blew it up, and I gave it this paper-like look. And then I gave it this two-tone backdrop just to kind of give it some depth. And I just put this background onto it to give this little half-tone here. And that's exactly what we did. We gave it a half-tone texture with these two-toned colors with the yellow and the black. This just kind of gave it that foreground to stand on, so it kind of doesn't just seem like it's a telephone booth sitting in the middle of a stamp. Now it actually gives it some ground to stand on, and it just makes it more of an art piece when you're looking at it. You could actually see this up on a wall like it was in a museum or something. It just kind of gives it that depth that you really are looking for in a design. So we have the pink stamp with the yellow and black two-tone background there, and I got this half-tone texture on top of the stamp here. And then we got the Never Mind the Bollocks and the Sex Pistols font. I added the Nevermind as one word because I felt like Nevermind should be one word, kind of like how like the Nirvana album for Nevermind is one word. I feel like as a cohesive piece when reading it, Nevermind together just makes a little bit more sense. On the album cover, it says Never Mind the Bollocks, here's the Sex Pistols. I wanted to get rid of the here's the Sex Pistols part and just strictly make it Never Mind the Bollocks. That way you have to know exactly what you're looking at to know that this is a Sex Pistols record. So we got this halftone texture on the background here, kind of gives it that gritty washed stamp feeling that I really liked, and it just adds another layer to the whole entire piece. And then here, to go with typical Sex Pistols fashion, we added the Queen's face on this oval backdrop. We added these X's and the mouth line there. If you look up the Sex Pistols and you do your history on the Sex Pistols, there was a lot of this happening at the time. So that's kind of what we did. We just tried to stay true to the original Sex Pistols design work, if you will. And in the background, behind the stamp, is this nice highlighter yellow color, and it just ties together so beautifully, and it's such a simple design, but it's so striking in the same breath. I say this a lot, but it's one of my favorite designs, and I did it the last minute. Seriously, I only did it 2 days ago. And yeah, so that is the front cover of the new monthly album redesign series, Sex Pistols Never Mind the Bollocks. And here is the back part of the Never Mind the Bollocks Sex Pistols redesign. So here you can see it looks like a piece of paper that's torn. I sourced this image on Pexels and found this really interesting paper texture, if you will. It had like a handwritten note, and it was like clearly like a ripped card, if you will. So yeah, so we masked that out. We got rid of the handwritten letter, and then we just put in a yellow background there. I made the paper that was initially brown, I turned it into pink to go with the same styling of the yellow and pink. So we got the yellow background here, and then we got the Sex Pistols logo up top here, and I just kind of created a white drop shadow just to make it stand out a little bit. Never Mind the Bollocks, carried that over from the front cover. I also carried over the Queen with the X's and the slash in her mouth from the front cover. I made it gray gradient halftone again. Really made it kind of rustic and distorted and distressed, kind of like an analog piece you would want. And then we got the side 1 and side 2 track listing of the album kind of angled here to give it some more uniqueness. It just flows really nicely with the way that the paper's ripped and everything, and then you got the drop shadow of the paper to kind of give it that dimension there. You get the little drop shadow here, and then you got the type here with all the track listing and everything. And I added this stamp at the top here to touch base to the front cover design I did. It's got the phone booth there, and it says London, which is where the Sex Pistols are from. So yeah, this is the back cover design of the Sex Pistols redesign. Like I said, this came out of left field. I was on an extreme creative block for probably about a good month and a half. I knew I had a monthly album redesign coming up, and I knew I was reading the Sex Pistols book. I didn't really know what else to pick. I have my Holy Grail wall right here. So I just picked first thing I saw literally 2 days ago, and this is what we came up with. And sometimes when you have creative block, it's really awesome to just take a step away and then come back and just start messing with things. So yeah, right now I'll show you a little montage of the front and back designs with a little vinyl mock-up. So yeah, enjoy this montage. So yeah, that's the Sex Pistols album redesign for Never Mind the Bollocks. This one is probably one of my favorite designs I've done so far. I know I say that every single design I've done. This one it really came so fast. It all cohesively worked so seamlessly together, and I truly love what I did with these designs. Sometimes when you got creative block, it sucks to be in that rut, but I'm telling you, when you come out through the other side, sometimes you make some of your best pieces and some of the most pieces that you're proud of. And I truly am proud of both of these pieces. So on that note, I hope you guys enjoyed this monthly album redesign series. This month was extremely close to not actually releasing. We pulled through. I think I created one of the best pieces of the monthly album redesign series thus far. Every Wednesday at 11 in the morning, I drop a new video, so make sure you stay in tune for that. And yeah, on that note, thank you guys so much for checking out this video. Until next week, as always, be safe, rock and roll, and peace.